Hey my beautiful bitches, it's me, Fiona St. James, and welcome to another episode of Fiona's Coffee Talks. And as always, I'd like to start off every day with a fresh, hot, black cup of coffee. Hold the cream! I'd love to, of course, in my favorite coffee mug. My logo, with no Kahlua. Okay, so, today's episode, drumroll please, I'm going to actually do a documentary series. So this is documentary series part 1. It's going to be a 3-parter. So on Netflix, there are 2 documentaries that I've watched recently. Actually, quite a few, but the 2 that I'm talking about today, the first one is on Studio 54. Woo! Oh my God. Okay, so that was a little before my time. Its heyday, which was very short-lived. It was Steve Rubell and Ian Schrager who created this amazing venue for people to go to. It debuted in 1977 and basically lasted 3 short years, from 1977 to 1980. Now, in 1977, I was only 12 years old, so I don't think I would have been allowed in there. But when you look at pictures or watch this documentary, or even just being a native New Yorker and being alive during those years, I knew of it, but obviously it wasn't any place that I could go to. But it apparently was this incredible, magical kingdom or haven of all of these celebrities and amazing people. And they really just created this atmosphere and this environment where if you were a celebrity, or even if you weren't, you probably felt like one. They were Steve Rubell was the entrepreneur, Ian Schrager was the architect. They combined forces and created this place, and you would have all of these major celebrities, Liza Minelli and Andy Warhol and Bianca Jagger and you name it, Michael Jackson, Liz Taylor. It was any and everyone who wanted to be there that was Hollywood would basically be there. So if you weren't a celebrity, it was an amazing opportunity to mingle with celebrities and probably feel like one yourself. So it's interesting too, because you would see Steve Rubell would be at the door and he would pick and choose who he wanted to let in. And you see the footage, and it was even that opening night, there were a sea of people trying to get in, and he basically picked and chose who he wanted. And so if you didn't look a certain way, or if he wasn't feeling you for whatever reason, your ass wasn't getting in anywhere. And once you actually were in there, when you see what was going on in there, and just all the amazingness, who wouldn't want to be in there? So, like I said, that was a little before my time, but it looked like it was incredible. You hear all of these amazing stories. You see the footage of it. Of course it was the 70s, so it was disco was huge at the time, and there were a lot of drugs going on. Cocaine was really huge back then. Well, it kind of still is. I don't think that ever went out of style. But, especially back then, it was really prevalent. They even had this big thing of a big gold spoon that was part of the decor, which obviously, you'd use the spoon to scoop coke up your nose. And Michael Jackson, you name it, Sylvester Stallone, any and everyone that was famous was there. Now, he also, you hear these stories, there was one night apparently where Chic, the group Chic, wanted to get in, and apparently he did not choose them to come in. And that was the night that they actually, because they were not let into Studio 54, they went to their recording studio and recorded one of their biggest songs ever, La Freak, Freak Out, which they actually, from what I've heard and from what I've read, they did that song, and they initially, instead of saying freak out, they were saying fuck you or fuck off, specifically to Steve, because he would not let them in. So it's ironic how something like not getting into the club when you're a celebrity like Chic was, produced one of their biggest hits that same night, because they were fuck you bitch, we're gonna write a song. And who knew? So I guess in 1980 when it closed down, like Steve made a big mistake. He went on some talk show, I forget which one, and you got to watch what you say in this town, or just in general, because then this bitch was carrying on about how, oh yeah, we make as much money or more money than the mafia, some shit like that. But he was like, shh, but don't let anyone know. This is on like television, so of course then like the FBI and IRS were like hot on their asses. They eventually, like the club ended up closing down in 1980. They ended up getting incarcerated. They were supposed to be there for like 3 years. They ended up doing less time because they ratted other bitches out, and then ended up in some, you know, not halfway hospital, but sort of like not fully a prison, but like, you know, they were out of the actual prison, and they were still in some form of, you know, being monitored. So, and then a few years later when all of that happened, and they were past that, Studio 54 did reopen in 1984 under new management, but it was not the same. It only lasted 2 years. It closed down in 86, and that was that. They went on to open Palladium in 1985, and then of course, then they got into the hotel business, and 1990 was when the Paramount Hotel opened in New York, and that really revived Times Square. Steve, unfortunately, you know, in the 80s, that was when a lot of people were dying of AIDS, which unfortunately he did contract that and ended up dying in 1989. So, you know, that it touches that as well. You know, the whole documentary is just kind of wonderful and fascinating, and just great to see the actual footage and see how it was just really this escape. And it was like 7 nights a week was like Saturday night for them. It was great. So check that out on Netflix. The second one that I want to speak about is Halston. Now, Halston, of course, was, you know, the four names that you always heard that were there were Liza Minelli, Andy Warhol, Bianca Jagger, and Halston. And Halston, of course, so that's why I wanted to put these two together. Now, if you notice my backdrop, this actually is thanks to my friend James Pierce. Hey, Lulu Bell, Miss Pierce. He actually got this done for me. And this is a Halston dress that I'm wearing. So when I knew I was going to do this, I was like, oh shit, I'm going to pull this out. You know, Halston started off like in the 50s, I think, and he was basically a milliner, and then so he would make hats. And he ended up working for Bergdorf Goodman. And if it's my understanding, was that he did like the pillbox hat for Jackie Kennedy. And, you know, he continued on from there. And then, of course, like in the 70s, it was like, you know, he like redefined fashion, because then suddenly he was using all of these cashmeres and ultra suedes, and you know, he was, you know, known for his hats, but then like this, you know, high-end fashion designer, and was like, you know, very hands-on with everything, obviously, you know, and even had like his own like entourage of models that he would use, Pat Cleveland, Beverly Johnson, a whole bunch of other ones as well. Well, and so like the 10 or 12 that he used all the time, they sort of became like his posse. And it's great because when you watch that documentary, you know, there's all of that footage with them, and he would like, you know, travel the world and like, you know, do all of these shows, and those were the models that he used. So it was almost like he would be creating different outfits catered specifically to them. He was also at the time the first designer who utilized a whole array of different kinds of models, because, you know, let's keep it real, back then it's like, you know, all of the models that you saw were white, and then all of a sudden he had this multicultural mix of models, all of which were beautiful, but it wasn't just your stereotypical white model. You know, you had blacks, Hispanics, this, that, and it was really just quite amazing, and to see how he went so far with it. And then, of course, you know, like most people in the 70s, you know, he was doing his drugs like everyone else, and he would be at Studio 54, you know, and he just became known as Halston, which is incredible. But then, you know, you gotta have good business sense in this world, because unfortunately what ended up happening with him was somehow in the fine print, some shit happened where he ended up like losing the licensing of his name. But before even that, like he he was such a high-end designer, but I guess because he wanted to like cater to everyone, in 1983, he did a deal with J.C. Penney and did a line with J.C. Penney. Now, J.C. Penney, of course, is not like high-end couture, so that was like a bit of a controversial move on his end because, of course, the fashion world is like, why is this bitch going to J.C. Penney when he's like, doing stuff that's so incredible and way up here? And it was sort of, J.C. Penney was looked upon as like, obviously not high-end fashion. But he wanted to do it, and he wanted to, I guess, have as many people wearing his designs as possible. Unfortunately, that ended up shooting himself in the foot, because by virtue of doing that, and that was 1983, Bergdorf Goodman ended up dropping him, and then he ended up sort of like, losing a lot of accounts or whatever, and then somehow, I forget how exactly it happened, but he ended up getting X'd out of the equation of his own name. So like the brand of Halston was still around, but like he suddenly had like nothing to do with it, which is kind of fucked up. Like how does something like that even happen? How do you like create this whole brand of yourself and then suddenly you're out of the equation, but yet they could still profit off of your name? And have other people making designs under the name of Halston, but he's completely out of the picture. So, and then, that was around the mid-'80s, and then unfortunately in 1988, he contracted HIV, and in 1990 ended up dying of AIDS as well. So, that's really like sad as well. So in both of these cases, you have Halston, you have Steve Rubell, both of which skyrocketed to the top, and Halston was there a lot longer than Steve Rubell, but they both have these tragic endings. So it was kind of, sad when you think of it. And of course, as someone I'm 55, I'm going to be 56 next week, and, I'm open and honest about the fact that I've been living with HIV for 28 years. A lot of people back then that were dying, I knew a lot of people that died. So like watching the documentary, like I'll forewarn you, if you're of my age group and if you have a lot of friends that passed away back then, it does sort of like make you relive that. And so, it's dramatic. As much as it's wonderful to see all of that, then, the sad reality is that there is a tragic ending in both of the cases. So, but, watch them. They're both on Netflix. I highly recommend them. And so that's that. Anywho, so hope you like my little review. Tune in to them. And, of course, thank you, as always, for tuning in to me. If you like what you heard, by all means, give me a thumbs up. Make sure you've subscribed. Set your notifications to all. And I look forward to seeing you guys the next time. Alrighty, thanks guys. Love you.